Students, I am Dr. Nidhi Mishra, tutor in Department of Pathology. So today's practical topic is chronic inflammation and healing. So first, the learning objectives of this practical. So after finishing this practical, you should be able to define chronic inflammation and mention few examples of chronic inflammation. You should be able to define the granulomatous inflammation. You should be able to identify and describe the gross findings of pulmonary tuberculosis. You should be able to identify and describe the gross findings of miliary tuberculosis. You should be able to identify and describe the microscopic features of TB in the given slide. You should be able to identify and describe the microscopic findings of leprosy. You should be able to describe various stages of syphilis, their clinical findings, as well as the microscopic finding. You should be able to identify and describe the gross findings of Maduromycosis. You should be able to identify and describe the microscopic findings of Maduromycosis. You should be able to identify and describe the microscopic findings of rhinosporidiosis. You should be able to identify and describe the microscopic features of granulation tissue and keloid. So first we'll start with the definition of chronic inflammation. So it is considered to be an inflammation of prolonged duration in which the active inflammation, tissue destruction and attempts at repair are proceeding simultaneously. So the duration will be from weeks to months. It is characterized by infiltration of mononuclear cells, which includes macrophages, lymphocytes and plasma cells. Now what are the various examples of chronic inflammation that you can give? First, depending upon the etiology, we are dividing into bacterial, fungal, parasitic and miscellaneous. Bacterial, you should remember about TB, that is tuberculosis, leprosy, syphilis. In fungal infection, you should know about actinomycosis, blastomycosis, streptococcus and coccidiomycosis. In parasitic infection, schistosomiasis will lead to chronic inflammation, and miscellaneous conditions like sarcoidosis and Crohn's disease. Now, how you will define granulomatous inflammation? So, granulomatous inflammation actually is a histological pattern of tissue reaction and it is a form of chronic inflammation. So, it is a type of chronic inflammation only, but in which you will see a specific finding or a specific tissue findings. That is your granuloma formation. Now, what is granuloma? I have told you before also in the previous practicals that granuloma is nothing but collection of activated macrophages or epithelioid cells along with T lymphocytes, and sometimes they are associated with central necrosis. It's not always your granuloma will have central necrosis, but in certain conditions, for example TB, you will have central caseating necrosis along with the granuloma formation. So granuloma is collection of activated macrophages or epithelioid cells along with T lymphocytes and multinucleated giant cells also. Now we'll start with each topic. First we'll discuss about TB. I'm not going to go in detail about TB. I'm just going to cover the gross and microscopic findings that you will see in today's practical. In very short few points about TB. So the causative organism is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It can affect any organ, but most commonly it affects lung, lymph nodes and ileocecal junction. In intestine, it can present as anything. It can present as an ulcer, it can present as a stricture, it can present as thickening. So the presentation is very much variable in intestine. Characteristic microscopic finding is granuloma formation with caseating necrosis, and you can demonstrate these bacilli with the help of AFB stain or culture. AFB stain will be taught to you in microbiology where they use the ZN stain technique for demonstration of tubercle bacilli. Now what are the various types of tuberculosis? We have primary tuberculosis, secondary pulmonary tuberculosis, which is also called as cavitatory TB, and we have miliary tuberculosis. Now we'll see few points about each. So primary tuberculosis occurs if the infection of person who have not had prior infection by tubercle bacilli. So the patient is exposed to the bacilli for the first time, then it is called primary tuberculosis. So primary lesion is called as Ghun focus, and it is typically 1 centimeter grayish nodule with granuloma and central caseation. Then we have something called as Ghun's complex, which is single lesion in pulmonary parenchyma, that is a Ghun's focus. usually subpleural with a hilar lymph node. So when you have only a parenchymal lesion, that is a Ghon's focus, but if you have parenchymal lesion as well as hilar lymph node, it is Ghon's complex. So this is the example that I have taken. This you can see, this is the pleural end or the pleural covering of the lung, and you can see this yellowish white nodule over the surface of the lung. So this is your Ghon's focus. Here you can see this is your bronchial tree. So this is your center area, this is your hilar area, and here you have a node. So this two together will form what is called as Ghon's complex. As I described you earlier, this is Ghon's complex, this is Ghon's focus, and this together will form Ghon's complex. TB intestine, this is the specimen which we have in our department. This is a part of small intestine where you can see you have a stricture. This is the dilated end and you have a stricture over here. So this was a case of TB intestine. So when you are describing the specimen in your exam, you will tell that this is a mounted specimen of small intestine or a mounted specimen of intestine showing a thickened area or a stricture at one end, most likely TB intestine. Next category is secondary tuberculosis. Secondary tuberculosis, as I told, is also called as cavitatory tuberculosis. It results usually from reactivation of dormant endogenous tubercle bacilli. So the patient has already had one either subclinical or clinical TB infection, then this bacteria got dormant over there and again reactivated because of any reason, most probably because of low immunity. So when there is reactivation, it will lead to secondary TB. Now reactivation typically occurs in apical portion of upper lobe because the oxygen level is highest at that area. So usually the secondary TB will be present with lesion in the apical region. So as you can see in this picture, you have a cavity. This is the lung. You can see the bronchus is going like this, and you have very large grey white nodular area with a cavity formation. So this is a secondary TB. Again, a picture I have taken from the net only. You can see these two cavities in the apical portion of the lung. So this is your secondary or cavitatory tuberculosis. The specimen which we have in our museum, this actually is the cavitatory lesion. How you are going to describe the specimen? So this is a mounted specimen of lung, the cut surface of which shows a cavitatory lesion near the apical region. Most likely appears to be a secondary tuberculosis. It has some millet-like appearance also. What is millet? Millets are some small seeds. So it appears that this patient is having both a secondary TB as well as the miliary TB. Miliary means it has spread throughout the lung parenchyma in the form of these small millets like appearance. So this is the specimen which we have in our department. Now what is miliary TB? It is disseminated form of TB with minute yellow white lesions resembling millet seeds. That's why it's called as miliary TB. The common sites are lung, lymph nodes, adrenal, bone marrow, spleen, liver, meninges, brain, eye and genitals. So this again a picture I have taken from the net where you can see these small yellowish areas. These are millet shapes, less than 1 centimeter in size, millet shaped lesions involving the whole of the lung parenchyma. And this is a section of the spleen. Again I have taken the picture from the net. You can see these small size lesions which are present throughout the parenchyma of the spleen. So this is a case of miliary tuberculosis. This is the specimen which we have in our department. So this is a mounted specimen of lung, cut surface of which shows multiple minute millet shaped lesions in the lung parenchyma, likely to be miliary tuberculosis. Now coming to microscopic examination. So the characteristic finding you will see is, first is central caseating necrosis, which will appear eosinophilic granular amorphous material. In the periphery of the caseating material you will have granuloma formation, means you will have collection of epithelioid cells and multinucleated giant cells. Now the multinucleated giant cells present in TB are very characteristic. They are Langerhans giant cell, in which the nucleus of the giant cells are arranged in a horseshoe pattern. So you will have giant cells called as Langerhans giant cells with nucleus arranged in horseshoe pattern. Apart from that, you will have lymphocytes and plasmacytic infiltration. Depending upon the age of granuloma, you can have some amount of fibroblast also. So this is a diagrammatic picture. This is the lung parenchyma. You can see you have an alveoli over here. Then you have some amount of fibrosis. This is an old lesion, so some amount of fibrosis has come. These are all your macrophages. Activated macrophages are the epithelioid cells, which are usually elongated or slipper shaped or soul shaped cells, nucleus. This is your Langerhans giant cells over here, and here you have a central caseating necrosis. This is a microscopic picture. You can see this is your Langerhans giant cell, like a horseshoe shape. We have a central caseating necrosis. This is a higher magnification. You can see these are all your Langerhans giant cells with a horseshoe arrangement. This is your central caseating necrosis, and surrounding you have lymphocytes and epithelioid cells. Here you can see the epithelioid cells very nicely. These are all these elongated cells. These are all epithelioid cells. This is your caseating necrosis in the center. These cells are all your epithelioid cells, and here you have a Langerhans giant cell, and this looks like a foreign body giant cell. When you do a AFB stain, these reddish color or pinkish color rod like structure, they are your AFB bacilli. For AFB staining for Mycobacterium tuberculosis, we use 20% H2SO4 for the stain. How it is different from leprosy, I will tell you later. So this was all about TB. We'll come to the next topic, that is your leprosy. So leprosy is also called as Hansen's disease, and it is caused by Mycobacterium leprae. It closely resembles Mycobacterium tuberculosis, but it is less acid fast. As I told you before, while doing the AFB stain for Mycobacterium tuberculosis, the acid percentage that you use is 20%, while in case of Mycobacterium leprae, the acid percentage that you use is 5%, so it is less acid fast. Then we have, it is a chronic infection disease affecting mainly the cooler parts of the body, such as skin, respiratory tract, mainly nose, eyes, peripheral nerves, superficial lymph nodes, and testes. It is transmitted from person to person through aerosols from lesions in the upper respiratory tract. Now this is a classification. Leprosy will be taught to you in detail in your theory lecture, so I am not going in very much detail. I am just going to talk about tuberculoid leprosy and lepromatous leprosy. So the two extremes of this Ridley-Joplin classifications, we have numerous classifications for leprosy, but most commonly we use is Ridley-Joplin classification, which is dividing the leprosy into 5 subtypes, that is tuberculoid, borderline tuberculoid, borderline lepromatous, and lepromatous leprosy. So in TT, your lesion will be usually single, it will be many in lepromatous leprosy. Size of the lesions will be variable, it will be small in lepromatous. Surface will be dry. In case of tuberculoid, it will be shining lepromatous. Sensations in the lesion, means your lesion, whatever lesion is there won't be any sensation in that lesion, while it won't be affected in lepromatous. Hair growth in the lesion will be absent, there won't be any hair in that area where the lesion is present. In lepromatous leprosy, it won't be affected. AFB usually we won't be able to detect in tuberculoid leprosy, while you can see globi are nothing but clusters. So I'll show you the picture. There will be clusters of these bacilli within the macrophages. You can do AFB staining from even nasal scrapings. Sometimes patient means we take the earlobe samples also. And lepromin test, if you do, which is again a hypersensitivity reaction, it will be strong positive in TT, while it will be negative in lepromatous leprosy. So this is a picture of a patient with lepromatous leprosy. You will read about this all in detail, but this is what is called as leonine face. The patient will have multiple nodular-like lesions all over the face. The eyebrows will be lost, the nose will be crooked, even the ears will have the lesions, so it will be nodular in appearance. So this is called as leonine face, which is characteristic for leprosy. Lepromatous leprosy. So lepromatous leprosy, what you will see in microscopy. So we are going to get biopsy from the skin. As I told you, the biopsy will be getting from either skin or a nerve. Most commonly we are getting skin biopsies. So whenever we are reporting the skin biopsies, we start with epidermis and then we go into dermis. So as you can see here, this is a diagrammatic picture of lepromatous leprosy. The epidermis is quite thinned out. There is no rete ridges, nothing. It is just normal thinned out epidermis. You have a very small layers. It's not multiple as you see in normal skin. So thinned out epidermis. Then you have a clear space. This is a clear space. Immediately below the basement membrane of epidermis, you will have a clear space which is called as Grenz zone. Grenz, Grenz zone. After that Grenz zone, you will have collection of these foam cells, which are also called as lepra cells, which are nothing but your modified macrophages, and this will have your all the bacilli. So when you see the histological findings or the microscopic picture, this was a diagrammatic representation. When you look for the microscopic picture, again you can see this is thinned out epidermis. There are no rete ridges or rete pegs. You have a clear zone. There is no cell or very less cell over here. It's purely collagen. And here you have these foam cells, these round cells with peripheral situated nucleus, which are foam cells. Again, this is a higher microscopic picture where you can see these large vacuolated cells. These are nothing but foam cells, or also called as activated macrophages, which will be filled with numerous bacilli. So this is the Zn stain we do for Mycobacterium leprae. You can see these foam cells, they are filled with these pinkish rod-like bacilli, which are Mycobacterium leprae. Coming to tuberculoid leprosy, the clinical picture in tuberculoid leprosy will be like this. It will be either a single lesion, it could be multiple lesion also. Patient won't have any sensation of touch or pain over this area. There won't be any hair growth in this areas. So there will be just these hypopigmented patches with no sensation of pain. So it will be anesthetic site and there won't be any hair growth. So when you take the biopsy from this area, what you will see is something like this. So again, this is a diagrammatic picture where you can see this is a normal epidermis that you are not seeing in your lepromatous leprosy. You can see these rete ridges are there. It's going up and down, up and down. This is your rete ridges are there. That is your normal epidermis. It's not thinned out. Then you have this collection of epithelioid cells. Epithelioid cells were not there in lepromatous leprosy. So when you are seeing epithelioid cells and giant cells, it always favors tuberculoid leprosy over lepromatous leprosy. So difference is epidermis is normal, it is not thinned out, there is no Grenz zone, and you have nice granuloma formation with numerous epithelioid cells, lymphocytes and giant cells. So this is the case of tuberculoid leprosy. When you do the AFB stain, there are very less chances that you will get any Mycobacterium leprae bacilli. This is the microscopic view. Again, you can see this is epidermis. You are not seeing any Grenz zone over here. The cells are extending up to the upper dermis. You have these Langerhans giant cells, you have collection of these epithelioid cells, and you have collections of lymphocytes. So these are all your granuloma formation. Coming to next topic is syphilis. So syphilis is a venereal disease, means it's a sexually transmitted disease which is caused by Spirochete treponema pallidum. The mode of transmission of this disease is through sexual intercourse. It can transfer from person to person with lesions on lip, tongues or finger. It can transfer through infected blood. That's why whenever we are receiving the blood, when we are getting the blood for donation, we always do a VDRL test to rule out syphilis, because that is one of the mode for transmission of disease. Then it can transfer from mother to the fetus. That time it is called as congenital syphilis. Now what is important in syphilis is you will see lots and lots of plasma cells. So when you are seeing a plasma cell rich area and when the patient is having a history, please consider the diagnosis of syphilis. So you will have various stages of syphilis: primary syphilis, secondary syphilis and tertiary syphilis. What happens in primary syphilis is there will be a typical lesion which is called as chancre, and it appears on genitals or at extragenital sites, like if the oral mucosa is involved, it will be in extragenital sites after 2 to 4 weeks of exposure. So once exposure has been done, after 2 to 4 weeks, a chancre will develop, or either on the genital region or in extragenital sites. When you see the microscopy, you will see endothelial cell proliferation. You can see these are all your endothelial cells. This is your endothelial cells. These 5 cells are your endothelial cells. So you can see there will be proliferation of endothelial cells. Again, this is your endothelial cell proliferation. And when you see the infiltrate, these are plasma cells. This is a plasma cell, this is a plasma cell, this is a plasma cell, this is a plasma cell. So you will see numerous plasma cells. So that is characteristic finding you will see in syphilis. In secondary syphilis, you will see mucocutaneous lesions and painless lymphadenopathy, which usually occurs 2 to 3 months after your exposure. So the mucocutaneous lesion can be in the form of patches on mouth, pharynx and vagina, or there could be a generalized eruption in condylomata and inner genital region. So again, what you will see is there will be some amount of necrosis. You will have endothelial proliferation. Along with that, you will have numerous plasma cells. Coming to tertiary or latent syphilis, it occurs years after the primary lesion. It is very rare nowadays, and it occurs in approximately 1/3 of untreated patients. So if the patient is getting treatment, tertiary syphilis is going to be very rare. And if the patient is not taking any treatment, there are chances that he might go for a tertiary syphilis. Now, tertiary syphilis are of two types. One is gamma formation, another one is diffuse lesion in cardiovascular system or syphilis. So there could be a gamma, or there could be involvement of CNS and cardiovascular system. Now, what is gamma? Gamma is also called as benign tertiary syphilis. These are nothing but nodular lesions, probably related to development of delayed hypersensitivity to bacteria. They are grey white in color, could be single or multiple, localized lesion with central necrosis. They can be seen in organs like liver, testis, bone and brain. In liver, the gamma is associated with scarring of hepatic parenchyma, and it is called as heparlobatum. So gamma in liver is called as heparlobatum. So this, you can see, this is the normal portal tract. You have a duct, an artery and a vein. So this is normal portal tract. These are your hepatocytes, which are arranged in a cord like fashion. Here you have a lesion or the gamma, where you can see a central coagulative necrosis. Please remember, this is very important. The necrosis you see here in syphilis is a coagulative necrosis and not caseating necrosis. So you will have coagulative necrosis, you will have lymphocytes, and more importantly, you will have numerous plasma cells. These are plasma cells with eccentrically placed nucleus and cartwheel arrangement of the chromatin, along with giant cells. So this is how a gamma will look. This is a microscopic picture. You can see some giant cells. I'm sorry, the picture is not very clear. Here there is some amount of necrosis and giant cell formation. This is a higher power view. You can see these nice giant cells are there, along with some epithelioid cells. You have endovascular proliferation also. So these all findings you will see in case of gamma of liver, along with numerous plasma cells also we will see. In neurosyphilis, you have something called as stapes dorsalis, in which the patient's spinal cord will be affected. And in cardiovascular system, you will have aortitis, aneurysm and aortic regurgitation. Coming to next topic, that is your maduromycosis or eumycetoma. So it is a chronic infection involving a limb, shoulder or other tissue, and is characterized by draining sinuses. It is caused by two fungi. Most common is Madurella mycetoma. There are numerous fungi which can cause maduromycosis, but the most common is Madurella mycetoma. And the discharge, which I told you, you can have draining sinuses from where discharge will come, that will have black color granules. When you see the microscopy, you will see again granuloma formation consisting of lymphocytes, plasma cells, neutrophils, histiocytes and foreign body type of giant cells, along with fungal hyphae. Now these are fungal hyphae you can highlight with the help of special stains like PAS and GMS. PAS stands for periodic acid Scripps reagent, and GMS stands for Gomori methionine silver stain. So this is a gross picture I have taken from the net of maduromycosis. This is These all pictures are of lower limb. You can see these multinodular lesion over the limb with discharging sinuses. This may be some amount of grass which got stuck. You can see these are all your discharging sinuses, and from these sinuses blackish color granules will come out. So you can see some amount of blackish granular areas over here. So blackish color granules will come out. The discharge will be having blackish color granules. This is one of the specimen we have in the museum. You can see this is a specimen of foot. You can mention whether it's right or left foot if you are able to see. And you have a large ulcerative lesion over the sole of the foot with the discharging sinuses. So this is a case of madramycosis. Again, this specimen we have in our department. So you have to describe this is a mounted specimen of foot. You have to tell whether it's right foot or left foot if you are able to identify. And there is a large ulcerative lesion involving the foot. We are not able to make out the discharging sinuses properly, but you can tell it might be a possibility of madramycosis. This is how a microscopy will look. You have this colony of fungi over here, which will have this brownish blackish pigment. Abscess formation is written because you can see some amount of neutrophil collection. You can see these are all neutrophil collections over here along with necrotic tissue. And when it goes beyond 1 week or 2 weeks, you will see some amount of lymphocytes, fibroblasts and epithelioid cells proliferation along with giant cells. This is the special stain I told you. PAS stands for per iodic acid Schiff stain, where you can see these fungal colonies, these nice non-septate hyphae or fungus. Now, why it is important to know about madramycosis is because there is one more condition which is called as actinomycetoma. This we described was eumycetoma. So whenever these type of infections are occurring because of fungi, it is called as eumycetoma, but when it occurs because of bacteria, it is called as actinomycetoma. To differentiate between these two, it is very important because the treatment will differ. The patient's clinical finding will be same. He will have multiple nodular lesions over the lower limb or the foot with discharging sinuses. Maybe the granules which are discharging from those sinuses, the color will differ, but you won't be able to tell exactly that this is because of fungi or this is because of bacteria. You have to go for either the culture or special stains. As I told you, why it is important, because treatment will differ. If it is eumycetoma, that is your fungal infection, antifungal will be more helpful, but if it is an actinomycetoma which is caused by bacteria, you need an antibacterial. So actinomycetoma is a gram positive organism which is 0.5 to 1 micrometer wide filament. It has septate fine branching filament and it's stained better with gram stain. Eumycetoma, as on other hand we saw, it is 2 to 5 microns wide hyphae with septate hyphae and stained best with TAS, that is per iodic acid scales, or GMS, that is gomorrhea methenamine silver stain. Coming to next topic is rhinosporidiosis. So rhinosporidiosis again is caused by a fungus called as Rhinosporidium siberi. The most common sites are nasal mucosa, nasopharynx, palate, conjunctiva, lacrimal sac, and occasionally in bronchus, larynx, vagina and rectum. Initial lesion will be a flat nodule which develops into sessile or pedunculated polyp. So this is a diagrammatic picture how a rhinosporidiosis will look. This is from the nasal mucosa. So the normal nasal mucosa will have a respiratory epithelium, that is pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Because of chronic irritation or inflammation, there is going to be metaplasia. What is metaplasia? Changing of one epithelium into another, means if the respiratory epithelium is normal in that area and instead of respiratory epithelium, squamous epithelium came over there, that is called as metaplasia. So you can see this is a metaplastic squamous epithelium, and you have these large sporangiums, these large vesicles like. So these are sporangiums which are filled with these small sporangiospores, and this is the characteristic finding we will see in rhinosporidiosis. Along with that, you will see some amount of inflammatory cells, like these are lymphocytes, you will have macrophages, you will have plasma cells. So this will be a case of rhinosporidiosis. This is the microscopic picture. You can see the respiratory epithelium over here. You have some squamous metaplasia over this area, and you can see these large numerous vesicles over here. These large numerous vesicles, they are filled with, they are called as sporangium, and they are filled with sporangiospores. Next topic is sarcoidosis. Sarcoidosis is a systemic disease of unknown etiology. It affects adults of 20 to 40 years of age. This disease is characterized by presence of non-caseating epithelioid cell granuloma. Please remember, there won't be any necrosis. If you are seeing a necrosis, it is not sarcoidosis. So you will see non-caseating epithelioid cell granuloma, also called as sarcoid granuloma. It can affect many organs or tissue. Most commonly it affects lymph nodes and lung. Other organs like skin, spleen, uvea, salivary glands, liver, bones of hands and feet can also affect it. So there will be non-caseating granuloma. Please remember that. This is a lymph node structure. You can see there is a capsule, nice capsule over here. You have follicles, lymphoid follicles, and then you have these granulomas. The granulomas, they are nothing but just collection of epithelioid cells along with giant cells. Here again you can see you have collection of lymphocytes over here and epithelioid cells, and this area which is focused, that is called as asteroid body. This is again a picture I've taken from the net. Here you can see there is a collection of these epithelioid cells. There is no giant cells as such seen here, but these are all collection of epithelioid cells. This is called as naked granulomas. This is called as asteroid body, which is very characteristic for your sarcoidosis. So when you are seeing a non-caseating granuloma with multiple giant cells, epithelioid cells, and you are seeing this asteroid body, it is a case of sarcoidosis. Now you can see these epithelioid cells very nicely in this case. These are all your epithelioid cells. These are all your epithelioid. It's like a elongated slipper shape, almost slipper shape, not exactly, but almost like a slipper shape. So this is very classic picture for your epithelioid cells. This is again, you have a granuloma with multinucleated giant cell, and you have this Schauman's body. So you can see asteroid bodies in sarcoidosis, and you can see Schaumann, Schaumann, Schauman's body. Now this is all about chronic inflammation and granulomatous inflammation. Coming to your next topic is healing. So healing again will be taught to you in detail in your theory lectures. I am just going to talk about granulation tissue and keloid. So granulation tissue, as you all know, is very important in healing by secondary intention or secondary union. So the term granulation tissue is derived from its name from granular and pink appearance of the tissue. It is first step in wound healing or repair after inflammation and clearing of necrotic tissue. So what is actually granulation tissue? Granulation tissue is nothing but proliferation of fibroblast and neovascularization. What does that mean? You will have new blood vessels arising from the already existing blood vessels. So in this diagrammatic picture, what you can see, this is the normal epithelium over here. You have an ulcer over here. You have numerous neutrophils over there, and after day 3, the fibroblast will come and start proliferating in this area. So after ulceration, there will be appearance of neutrophils and macrophages within 24 hours. Within 3 days, fibroblast will come. These elongated spindle cells are your fibroblasts. They will come and they will start proliferating. These are all fibroblasts, and you will have these new blood vessels, which is called as neovascularization. So this is the microscopic picture. You can see this is your epithelial tissue, and you have these numerous blood vessels over here. These are all your numerous blood vessels or neovascularized tissue, along with the fibroblasts in the backgrounds and inflammatory cells. This is much more higher magnification. You can see all these are all blood vessels. These are all blood vessels, and you have these fibroblasts. This is a fibroblast over here. You have neutrophils, you have lymphocytes, you have macrophages. Again, you have fibroblast, you have fibroblast over here, you have fibroblast over here. So this is your granulation tissue picture. Coming to keloid. Keloid is during the process of healing, excessive formation of collagen may result in keloid formation. So in secondary healing, what happens is, final stage of secondary healing is wound contraction. So the wound will contract and it will heal completely. sometimes what happened, the collagen deposition which occurs during one contraction, it is in excessive amount, so that leads to scar formation. Now these scars can be hypertrophic scar or it could be keloid. Microscopically what you will see is only collagen, fibroblast and collagen. You have to distinguish both clinically, that whether it's a hypertrophic scar or whether it's a keloid. So how you are going to differentiate? So if suppose the initial ulcer or initial lesion is of 2 centimeter, and after healing if you got the scar again it is of 2 centimeter, then it is called as hypertrophic scar. But if after healing your scar is 4 centimeter or 5 centimeter or skin centimeters, it's projectile, then it is called as keloid. So hypertrophic scar differ from keloid in that they are confined to the borders of initial wound. So if it is a 2 centimeter lesion, the scar will be confined to that 2 centimeter area only in hypertrophic scar, while it will access the initial wound in case of keloid. So you can see here, this actually your lesion was only up till here, from here to here, this only was your lesion, but your connective tissue growth is extending beyond this lesion. So this is the case of keloid. As I told you, microscopically you will just see collagen fibers along with these elongated fibroblastic cells. So that's all for today's practical. You have two specimens, mainly two specimens. One is your tuberculosis, so we'll see the specimen of primary TB, secondary TB and miliary TB. Then you have specimen of TB intestine, and then we have specimen of Madura-mycosis. In slides mainly you have to see the granuloma formation. So in TB you will see caseating necrosis with granuloma formation. In case of leprosy, if it is a case of lepromatous leprosy, you will see thinning of epidermis, Gren zone and foam cells. If it's a tuberculoid leprosy, you will see a nice granuloma within the upper dermis itself. Then you have, in case of sarcoidosis, and you will see naked granulomas. Then we have Madura-mycosis and we have rhinosporidiosis. Rhinosporidiosis, you will see sporangiums as sporangiospores. Finally, we have granulation tissue and keloid. So that's all for today's practical. Thank you.